Welcome to Unit 2, Chapter 4, Measurement Systems. This is Exercise 4-1, Question 5. So let's convert these following questions, running them off as indicated in the brackets. Our first question, we need to convert 14 teaspoons into fluid ounces, rounding it off to the nearest half ounce. We don't necessarily have a relationship between fluid ounces and teaspoons. So in this case, kind of like when we're adding or subtracting with fractions, we need to find a common denominator or a common measurement unit. And in both the case of teaspoons and ounces, they can be both measured in milliliters. There are 5 milliliters in 1 teaspoon, and there are 28.4 milliliters in 1 fluid ounce. So if we take a look at it that way, let's take our 14 teaspoons and multiply it by 5, 5 representing the 5 milliliters there are in 1 teaspoon. 14 times 5 equals 70 milliliters. Now that we have 70 milliliters, we're going to divide that by 28.4 because that represents the amount of milliliters in 1 ounce. So how many 28.4 units are there in our 70 milliliters? 70 divided by 28.4, we get 2.4647887 ounces. That goes right there. We need to round this off to the nearest half ounce. That's going to be either 2 even or 2.5. I think we can all see 2.4 is much closer to 2.5 ounces than it would be in 2 ounces. So there you go, 14 teaspoons equals 2.5 fluid ounces rounded to the nearest half ounce. Okay, our next example, 24 tablespoons. Let's convert that into cups, and then we'll take those same 24 tablespoons and convert them into US quarts, and they're asking us to round that off to 3 decimal places. So do we have a relationship between tablespoons and cups? If you look at your chart carefully, you see that we indeed do. 1 cup is equal to 16 tablespoons. We have 24. Therefore, we're going to take our 24 tablespoons, divide that by 16, the amount of tablespoons that will equal 1 cup. And when you divide 24 by 16, you get 1.5 or 1.5 cups in 24 tablespoons. Now we can either go with tablespoons into US quarts, or we can use the cups into US quarts. We still need some form of common measurement system. So if we use the cups, and we know that there are 8 ounces in a cup, we know there are 32 ounces in a US quart. So we'll take our 1.5 cups, we'll multiply it by 8 ounces being the amount of ounces in 1 cup. Then we'll take that answer and divide it by 32, because once we have the total ounces in a cup and a half and divided by 32, the amount of ounces in a US quart, we'll know exactly how many US quarts we have, and that gives us decimal 375 US quarts, and that's going to go there, and it's rounded to 3 decimals already. Moving on to the next one, 12 cups into tablespoons and teaspoons. 12 cups times 16 tablespoons. 16 tablespoons equaling 1 cup, we have 192 tablespoons. Now, if we remember the relationship between teaspoons and tablespoons, we need 3 teaspoons to make 1 tablespoon. We'll take the 192 tablespoons and multiply it by 3. Again, 3 tablespoons equaling 1 tablespoon, and we end up with 576 tablespoons. So 12 cups is equal to 192 tablespoons, and 12 cups is also equal to 576 tablespoons. 1,260 US quarts. Let's convert that into imperial gallons. And we don't have a relationship between US quarts and imperial gallons. So again, we're going to need a common unit of measure, and we're going to use ounces. We know that a US quart has 32 ounces. So if we multiply the amount of quarts that we have, 1,260, by 32, the amount of ounces in 1 quart, we realize that 1,260 quarts equals 40,320 ounces. Now let's take that 40,320 ounces and divide it by the amount of ounces in an imperial gallon. Do you remember what that one is? It's 160. So 40,360 ounces divided by 160, the amount of ounces in 1 imperial gallon, gives us 252 imperial gallons. So that's our answer. 1,260 US quarts equals 250 imperial gallons. Our next one, 2,478 imperial gallons. Let's convert it to US gallons. And we want that rounded off to 1 decimal. Again, the only relationship we can use is the amount of ounces in each. And in an imperial gallon, we have 160 ounces. So let's take our 2,478 imperial gallons and multiply it by 160, and we realize we have a total of 396,480 ounces. Now we need to know how many ounces there are in a US gallon, and that, of course, is 128. So let's take our 396,480 ounces, divide it by the amount of ounces in a US gallon, which is 128, and we realize that we have 3,097.5 US gallons, that being the final answer. So again, you see that we can go through two different units of measure when we are trying to convert. The only thing we need to know is that all-important relationship. Then it's a matter of dividing or multiplying. Make sure you get to work with that chart and are comfortable with it. And once you realize what the relationships are, all the questions become much easier.